Hello, my name is Steve Jordans. I'm a professor at University of Toronto and the director of the Advanced Learning Technologies Lab there. In our lab, we create educational technologies based on educational psychology research, and then we do a lot of research on the technologies themselves to kind of maximize efficacy and usability. And why I'm doing this video here today to show you one of our, well, I guess we could call it a new technology, but it's really not. We've been using variants of this in our class for many years now, but we've finally released a version that's real commercial grade level, meets or exceeds all the privacy, security, and accessibility requirements that every university has. And basically it's something we can now share and that other users can kind of configure to match their needs. Whatever their learning outcomes are, they can make this kind of work for them. This is an assessment tool that you can use either in a formative way, so to use assessment for learning to actually enhance students' learning, or you can actually use it as a summative tool. In fact, there's with mTuner, there's the possibility that we could have students sitting an exam with their cell phones, writing an exam on their cell phone, which has a number of advantages. And one I'll just have you think about right off, which is, if you ever look into the budget that universities spend on photocopying for exams, it's huge. And if we can deliver this content electronically, there's huge cost savings that we could reinvest in something better in universities, something that enhances student learning. So that's the potential of what I'm about to show you. So let's just go there. So I'm at mtuner.ca here. It's called mTuner, which you could think of as mind tuner or memory tuner, depending on how you want to think about it. I'll explain that title as we go, that name. But here we're on the sign-in screen. Notice that when you're here, you can create a new account. And in fact, any of you, while you're watching this video or afterwards, if you want to create an account, you can go ahead and play with the system here, fully featured, ready to go. I'm going to sign in with my Google account, and because I'm already into my Google account, it'll probably just take me right into the system. There we go. If you weren't already signed into your Google account, it would prompt you for a password, but then you would be in, so that's one easy way to get in. This is now my dash, and it has any courses that I would be using mTuner within would be listed in this dash. So I've got a couple here. I'm going to go into my intro psychology class, and then once you're within a class, what it's telling me now are the different activities, mTuner activities that I've implemented in this class. So we have already done 3 in this case, and there's a 4th that's about to come up. So this allows me to show you a version with some data in it. In fact, I'll go to the 3rd version here. Let me jump into that. And where we're at now is a dash for this activity, and you're seeing that it's telling me a little bit. It's telling me how many students have completed the activity, and that is not a misprint. My class does indeed have over 1,800 students in it. So 1730 completed this activity. It's giving you a sense of grades. You'll see these grades look pretty high. That's because we use this in a formative sense. I'll give you a clearer idea of what that's about in a moment. You also see a panel for academic integrity. I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but there's a number of measures that we have that give us a good sense of whether students seem to be doing these collaboratively or various other things that might be going on. The idea here isn't to try to punish a student for acting in a way that goes against our academic integrity policies, but it's more to inform the professor how much of this is going on, and to give them a sense. So if they want to try different ways of implementing it or different ways of framing the activity, you can actually see the impact things have on the level of academic integrity that's going on. So it's more of an information thing sent back to the professor. Okay, now in this activity, we've already got some questions created, but part of the tool is a question creation thing. So I'll just give you a sense. I'm not actually going to add this question because this is an active activity, but I'll give you a sense. So I could create a new question, And this is the authoring tool that, in our case, our graduate students create new questions every term. Part of their task is to learn a chapter and to add some questions for it. And that's partly because we're very fussy about how our questions are created. So we have a guide that we're happy to share that kind of brings all the best principles. It kind of brings together, a lot of the Bloom stuff, plus a lot of the things we know about how to write a good multiple choice question. So ultimately allows students to write questions that tap knowledge at different levels. And so they could just write, the student would just write the question here, the correct alternative here, always, and then the various foils would go in these other slots, and you can etc. Configure it as you wish, etc. Now there's a couple of other things here that might be kind of interesting. So hints and explanations, you're going to see this in action, but part of what mTuner does is it gives students a second chance. So they're going to see the question, they're going to have the option of answering, obviously, but if they get the answer wrong, then you can give them some sort of hint. And this hint could be, it could be a page number of a textbook. Go check out this page number and look at it. It could be a website. It could be whatever you want. You can push them somewhere and you kind of say, hey, go investigate this, because there's something there that will give you some information about the answer. And so they can investigate the hint if you have that enabled. Then they get to go back to the question and have a second chance at half marks, or at least that's the way we set it up. Everything's configurable, but that encourages the student, when they're wrong, to relearn what the right answer was and to try to choose that right answer before continuing, which is very important, because students, the whole reason of doing this is students learn a lot while they're being tested, and therefore that's what we're trying to pack into what's going on here. So hint that hopefully gets them a right answer, but the explanation is the last thing they'll experience for every question. And so this is a chance to really kind of hit the nail on the head again, and just make sure that when students leave the question, you explain to them, yes, the correct answer was C, and this is why it was the correct answer. Okay. Now you can also use tags. So we use these. So for example, you see the Bloom's hierarchy here. You can kind of say, okay, these are the skills that you're asking students to use. You can also add your own tags of a sort if you want to categorize questions in a certain way. Okay, so that's the authoring tool. And so as students author these questions, they get built up in this listing here. And what you're actually seeing in this listing is we have had 1,700 students go through this activity. And when they go through the activity, they can actually rate the questions themselves, and you'll see this. In fact, why don't we do that? Before we go any further, let me just show you what is happening on the student side, because I think it's important that you have that sense. So you can preview an activity at any time, so I'm going to preview this, and now you're basically coming into this as a student would. Here we have some academic integrity kind of information, things that are considered the appropriate way to do this. So you can say, yep, I understand, I'm ready to go. And then what it's going to do is walk us through the questions one at a time. The questions are going to have a very distinct style to them. And here's the first part that's kind of different from what you might expect from a multiple choice test. First of all, you get the question. Scientists observe that during sleep, the pawns send random bursts of excitatory activity to other areas of the cortex. What is the cortex doing with these random signals? So you might think about this and you might say it is generating dreams. Okay, so this is kind of a free recall step. And the reason we have this in is that the whole benefit of testing is thought to come from what's called retrieval practice. Practice pulling that information out of your mind. And free recall does that best. Okay, and there's a lot of evidence, if you just show the alternatives, students go right to kind of recognizing which one's right. But if you allow them to free recall, they retrieve in a better, more powerful way. And in fact, there's a lot of research now that shows the benefits of going through a test are exaggerated or amplified when students do this step first. So we tell students that they don't get any credit for getting the answer right here, but we tell them that if you take the time to do this, you will learn more by doing this test. And we find that in fact when you do that properly, a lot of students, the vast majority of students, do generate answers as you wish. So at any rate, that's step one. Now we go to what looks like a more typical multiple choice kind of question. So now we have the question, and now we have a number of these answers. And you see they're quite different from what I said, but that's good. You know, me still thinking that it's about dreams is something, you know, I now get to learn, okay, a little bit more detail than I said. Notice also you have a timer at this step. You have 1 minute to make a choice. So I know, for example, that the answer 1 should be the correct answer here. And by the way, you know, compared to my answer, I now have linked this to activation synthesis. Oh yeah, that's it. I am going to intentionally pick an incorrect answer. Okay, so I know this is incorrect. And now when I submit, it's going to tell me that's incorrect. Big red sign. This is because there's a lot of data, in fact, data from our own lab, that suggests that if you do not tell them that they're incorrect, they will learn the incorrect answer. So you have to correct things right away. And that's what this next step is about. So step 1, we say incorrect. We now give them a hint, a module, and they have now 5 minutes to go check that out, read through it, try to find the right answer. Okay, and this is a more powerful, we're using some exploratory learning here. This is a more powerful way to undo or fix the fact that they picked the wrong answer, because as soon as they pick it, they've learned it. And so now we really have to counteract that. Okay, so this is telling them go to module 5.1 of your electronic textbook, which is what we use, so they can go there, they can have it open in a separate screen, so they could, you know, bounce over to somewhere else and then bounce somewhere back when they're done. At least in this mode they can. I'll come back to this in a moment. They check out the hint, they say next, and now they have the question again, and their previous answers grayed out. So they have 3 left to choose. The right answer would be the top one. So I can either pick it or not. I'll not, just for fun. Although I should point out, look at my current score is 0. I will pick it because I want to show you that when I pick it and I submit my response, it says correct. And now I got half marks. That's what that's kind of suggests. So far I've got a 50% on the exam because I got it right the second time. Now it comes right to the explanation. And so now we're just kind of unpacking the question, saying the same thing in a slightly different way, I guess, or adding a little bit more to it, but we're trying to make sure before students leave this question, they really understand, you know, what it was about, what was the correct answer, and why. And once they do that, they go on to the next. They can, if they wish, provide feedback at any point, so they can say, you know, I think that was a 3-star answer. Okay, and then they can continue on. And as they continue on, their score continues to develop. Again, getting full points if it's correct the first time, half points correct the second time, no points if they don't get it correct. But it marches on in this way. So I think that gives you a good sense of the question flow. Now I should stress, this question flow is when we're using mTuner in what we call the formative mode, okay? And not the practice. So there's 3 modes to use mTuner in. The formative mode, they only go through the test once, just as I showed you, all of these questions, and they get the score that they get, and that's it. Practice mode, they can go through the test over and over and over again, and therefore potentially even keep getting higher and higher scores. So this is really good when you're using mTuner more as a study aid for students, and it's an extremely powerful study aid for students. In fact, it's kind of cool when you combine student-generated test questions, allow them to generate the questions, and then give them the practice test to work from. So that's kind of cool. And there's exam mode. I'm going to put exam mode on hold for a second, but exam mode is if you're going to use it in a much more summative way as a formal final exam. Okay, so let's get there in a second. Let me just, now that you have a clear sense, I think, of the tool, just walk through some of these features so you get the sense. You know, as the exam is happening, you are seeing these ratings pile up. I didn't highlight the flag part, but they can actually flag the question if they think there's a problem or an issue with it as well. And so you're kind of seeing, for example, this question, you know, people don't seem very happy with this question. They're giving it 1 star and they're flagging it. And so you get a sense there of dissatisfaction. So you probably want to go check out that question, which I think you can do quite simply by going into edit mode, editing that question. And you know, there's something about this that they don't like. So one of the options you have here, and I'm not going to demonstrate all these in detail, but you can I'm going to turn off edit mode there. You can change questions on the fly, and you can remove questions from, you know, counting in the final count of the exam and stuff like that. So you can allow the exam to continue, but then, you know, on a class-wide basis, make modifications that apply to the whole class, which is kind of cool as well. And you see, here's another question that we would be a little worried about. 2 stars is fairly normal. This is very odd. This is probably way too, way too easy of a question. If they're giving it 5 stars, they probably like it too much, maybe. But there you go. You get a sense of the questions and their stats that they go on there. Okay. Wow. There's so much. So you can schedule when these things start and when they stop. You know, what time period students have to do the exam within. All of these things, you can get even more details by drilling down. But I think from the sky high view, that is a sense of the application. Let me just give you that IOU and talk about the summative mode. When you run an exam in the summative mode, then it works a little differently. So it works as follows. For every question that students see, they can either give a final answer, or they can give a tentative answer, or they can give no answer. Okay, and then they can go on to the next question, so they can keep skipping through the questions this way. But as they skip through the questions, anything they give a final answer to, that disappears from their active list, right? So they can continue going through the questions until they have a final answer for everything. And in fact, as soon as they even have a tentative answer for everything, then a submit button lights up. And so they can submit, which will submit all their tentative answers as final answers. And at that point in time, they can see their score. It's kind of crazy to think of a class full of students seeing their score while they're writing the exam. But just to give you a sense of that, if you're running mTuner integrated with your LMS, those scores can be brought into your LMS gradebook and available literally moments after the exam is complete. So it saves a whole lot of logistics on that side. There's also another feature. Now, obviously, we're not in the formal exam mode. We're probably not going to be giving them hints. I mean, you could do the open book kind of version if that's what you wish. But the typical exam mode version, they would just have 1 chance for every question, so it would be more typical of a formal exam. But we still worry, of course, that they've answered some questions wrong. And if we just let them leave, they're going to learn those wrong answers. And so the other capability they have is once they submit and once they see their score, they can then review the questions, either all of the questions or the questions they got wrong. So they can review the questions they got wrong, find out what the right answer was and why it was right. So they can see those explanations again. So literally sitting in the exam, they can do the review right in the exam. And if they have an issue with one of if they really don't think what you're saying is right, they can not voice it, but they can indicate it on the exam, again, giving the professor a chance to take a look at those questions in a little more detail. So Yeah, so those are the three modes. Practice, do it as much as you want. Formative, the one I really showed you. And then the summative, the one they would use in a final exam. By the way, in all of these cases, you have a lot of control over how questions are delivered. So you can do things like the following. You could have a large, let's say you had 200 question pool, but every student gets 100. So you could literally have random selection so that every student is getting a different 100 questions. And then you can even correct for overall difficulty at the end once you know how difficult those questions are, once you've used them all. You can randomize the order of questions. You can randomize the order of the alternatives. When you randomize the order of the alternatives, you can lock certain answers. So if you want like all of the above to always be the last answer, you can lock that as the last, and the other ones vary. So what this means is that students can be sitting side by side, using their electronic devices, but really having kind of different experiences, and it really helps the academic integrity side of things. Okay. You may have also seen things like timings and stuff like that going on. All of those things are configurable. There's a lot of activity settings that you can play with. You can add certain titles as you go through, just to give you a sense of the control you have over some of these things. I'm not going to go through them all in detail. It would just be good for you to play with this the first time you create an activity. But it's not... Oh, that's simply because I didn't change anything. So it's all there, all ready to be played with. Have fun. I think that gives you a sense. All right. Last thing I will say. I know I probably said that already, didn't I? Oh, well. Really, last thing I will say is this was also created to be up to what's called an LTI 2.0 standard. What that means is it integrates very easily with virtually every LMS that's out there. So it can become a tool that's just part of the LMS, activated through that, and it works very smoothly in that way. In fact, that's sort of our preferred use case, rather than trying to have it serve as a platform in and of itself. So yeah, cool. That's mTuner. We're tuning the mind. That's the analogy. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.